We start with the buzz about a grand bargain on funding for Arizona schools. Here's the rough outline proposed by conservative columnist Bob Robb of the Arizona Republic and a Republican lawmaker who's a key swing vote. Governor Ducey and other Republicans want to call a special session to protect last year's historic tax cuts from a statewide vote this fall that could repeal them. The groups behind the repeal are the same groups behind Prop 208. So here's the bargain. Call off the vote on repealing the tax cuts in exchange for hundreds of millions of dollars in new school funding. Will it fly? Let's ask our guest, Rebecca Gao, Executive Director of Stand for Children, a major funder of the Proposition 208 initiative. She served as top education advisor to Republican Governor Jan Brewer. Gao is also an expert on education policy and research and data analysis. Welcome back to Square Off.
Thank you, Bram. It's good to be here.
There is still an unanswered question I hope you will clear up after the court's ruling striking down Prop 208. Do you plan to appeal?
Honestly, I wish I could tell you an answer to that, but we have not decided yet. Our attorneys are reviewing the ruling, and we're looking at the pros and cons.
So that is still a possibility. The lower court judge did provide a roadmap to appealing, but still, it's a long shot.
He said we were free to, but the technicalities within, how appeals work, the risk of going through all that in the Supreme Court, acting politically instead of legally again, we have to weigh all those issues.
Now, that grand bargain I just outlined will offend a lot of people. I've heard from them. Opponents of Prop 208 are saying, hang on, the court threw it out. Why are we even talking about this? Supporters of Prop 208, people who voted for it, are still outraged, saying, hang on, how could the court throw out my vote? They won. What's your response to both sides?
Right. Well, I think part of it is in Judge Hanna's ruling, and it's also the precedent that we knew had been set before in legal cases, where before now, the courts had upheld the voter's will as much as possible. And so there were other avenues the court could have taken to uphold the will of the voters, which is why their ruling was a technicality and a policy loophole instead of upholding what 1.7 million Arizonans passed in 2020. So when you look at it that way, what is the difference between the legislative proclivity and the voters' proclivity? In a constitution, it says they are equal. And so from that point of view, if the voters and the legislature should be treated as equal when initiatives are passed or ballot measures are passed, then regardless of what you think about Prop 208, if you look at the initiative process and honoring the will of the people in a democracy, then you need to think about funding education because that's what the voters asked for.
Okay, so that's maybe a hint of what an appeal could sound like. So before we get into the grand bargain, it seems we've lost sight of what Prop 208 was supposed to do. Mm-hmm. Why do you think that money is still needed?
Well, I do get asked that a lot because people think that COVID dollars have added all this money to education, so didn't it solve everything? And it did not. And that is really evident in some really pretty intense data about education in Arizona. We still have the largest class size in the nation. We have the worst student counselor to student ratio in the nation. We still have some of the lowest teacher pay in the nation, and we have a horrible teacher shortage. Those things can't be fixed with short-term money from COVID dollars. Schools don't hire personnel with money that's going to run out in a couple years. So we very much need to address these issues, and the only way to do it is to have enough money to hire people.
So there is talk of a grand bargain that could replace the money, which was in the hundreds of millions of dollars, anywhere from 400 to 800. It was really in flux. Mm-hmm. What do you make of that discussion on a grand bargain? Is that even possible, do you think?
I think it's imperative. The voters asked for education to be funded. The voters asked for additional revenue to come into our state. And so it's incumbent upon the legislature to address that, to figure it out. And if it means letting the tax cut happen, there is so much money right now, $1 billion in ongoing surplus in the state budget. There's room for all of it. And the voters want it, and there's a big election coming up in November. So it makes all the sense in the world for the parties to come together and find a solution that's good for Arizona's kids, regardless of the politics.
It's a pretty narrow shot at it seems. I want to put up a soundbite from State Senator Paul Boyer, Republican. He has a swing vote in the Senate last week on Arizona Horizon. He said he supported a grand bargain. Let's listen to what Paul Boyer said.
I do think there is an opportunity to do both. I don't think it's an either or. And so that's why I'm starting to have some preliminary meetings on this, cobbling together some kind of grand bargain.
And again, if anything's going to get done, Paul Boyer has to vote for it in the state Senate. It's just such a narrow majority. He wants school choice measures as part of this deal. Mm-hmm. Could you go for that?
It depends, Bram. It really depends. I mean, school choice can mean a lot of things. It can mean charters. It can mean education savings accounts. So I'd love to talk more about it, but I can't answer that without knowing exactly what he means.
Okay. Then there's the hammer, so to speak, that your group has, which is going to the polls in November asking voters to repeal the tax cut that exists right now. Mm-hmm. And there's kind of like a game of chicken going on. I don't want to get too deeply into that regarding that repeal, but is that still out there?
Yes, so Prop 307 is the name of the ballot measure, the referendum that we gathered hundreds of thousands of signatures to put on the ballot. It is in the middle of some court challenges, which always happens in these scenarios. So we'll see what happens with the court challenges, and we hope it will stay on the ballot and voters can, once again, let the legislature know that they want more money in state revenue to fund education, not less.
Okay, so lots of moving parts here.
Yes.
Not much time for things to happen. The session is winding down. What do you think is likely to happen over the next month or two?
I think there's going to be a lot of uncertainty over the next month or two. I think we're going to think it's one thing one day and the next thing the next day. But my hope is that by the end of all of this, that people who I know care about our state will do the right thing for kids and put the money into education that voters asked for.
And you could see a grand bargain being that way.
I am hopeful that it could happen. I really am. So we'll see.
All right. Rebecca Gao, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you, Bram. My pleasure.